Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. A bit of a different time this week than normal, but glad to be here. And with me, I have Dan. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, really good, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Staying out of the weather, which is pretty poor outside here in Australia, which is, I guess, unusual for Brits to hear. We've got torrential rain at the moment, so staying nice and dry. And I had my new City shirt just arrived last night, so very happy that's arrived in time for the podcast as well. Which is
we
good.
do. We've got a bit of British weather going on down here at the moment. It's a bit wild.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, I mean, we've got an exciting game tonight to preview, but we'll start off by talking about that fantastic win last week against Oxford United. Made it 5 in a row for us, and most importantly, from my point of view as well, was to see Lewis Potter amongst the goals, really showing that we've got some versatile options up front. We're not just sort of relying on Wilkes or White to score all the goals. We've actually got all three of them now getting in amongst it.
Yeah, it's I mean that's always really good. I think we've talked about that a few times this season, that it's been nice to see that we haven't relied on one player like our last promotion was being heavily relied on Hernandez. So where he scored 20, was it 21 or 22 or something? Something mental.
And even in recent seasons with Bowen.
Yeah. Bowen and even Campbell as well. While he was here, he was pretty reliable. But it's nice to see that we've got Magennis is above 10 for the season. Wilkes is above 10. Is Lewis Potter there yet? He's pretty close, I think.
I looked at it. I think he's on 9 or maybe 8.
Yeah, right.
So he should get there. And I was going to say, I don't know the last time we would have had 3 players in double figures for the season. It would have been a long time, I reckon.
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty impressive to have, all that, plus, Eves has bagged a couple and he's missed
White
quite a
as
lot.
Well.
Yeah, White's bagged a couple.
Doherty.
Yeah, Honeyman's grabbed a few and plenty of assists. So pretty productive forward line when you look at all the pieces.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, Lewis Potter out of form for a little bit, maybe in recent weeks, was, I guess, dropped to the bench or rested on the bench in a recent fixture, and then came back into the side and scored. And now he's got another 2 goals under his belt. And there was that moment just before halftime as well, where he took the shot first time from, I think it was an Elder ball infield, or it was a throw in from I think Elder potentially, which he hit, and it was a wicked hit, and was really dipping quite quickly and almost crept into the top corner, which would have been. We've had quite a few tremendous goals this season, but it would have been right up there. And look, it just showed his confidence in the match, and he had that, awesome touch on the left wing as well to keep the ball in play. So really sort of at the peak of his powers at the moment, and really full of confidence, which is great to see.
Yeah, that shot just before half time, I would just watch the highlights, and I knew that he'd scored 1 in the first half and 1 in the second, and I saw him score the first goal, and still when that was going through the air, I was like, fuck, this is going in.
Yeah.
It was insane.
It was one of the was it Hughes on the commentary might have said about this, or someone said, like that was one of the best hit strikes that I've seen in a while. Obviously we had the Coyle goal in the cup was probably the sweetest strike, but this one wasn't too far off it, and it was just a shame it didn't find the back of the net.
Yeah, I think that would have really capped off Lewis's Keane's performance to get the hat trick, I think, but I mean, 2 goals is still not too shabby. 2 goals and 3 points. Can't really complain too much.
Yeah, well, exactly. 5 wins in a row now. I think I'm just looking it up just to make sure I get the stats right. I think it's 5 wins in a row with 4 clean sheets in amongst that, with just the 1 goal conceded to Peterborough in the run. And what's that? That's 7, 10, 12 goals scored in 5 games as well. So, solid defensively as well. So really, both ends of the pitch operating at their full powers.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we keep, getting clean sheets. I know there were a couple of dicey moments in that game against Oxford. They had a couple of good opportunities. I think one where Ingram pushed it out and it fell straight to their striker, but he skied it. That was pretty dangerous. They, had an early sort of opportunity that I think bobbled in front of him, and he sort of pushed it across goal, and it only needed an Oxford attacker to have been following that in a bit harder, and they probably could have had a tap in the second minute or something. So
Yeah.
while it was good that we, managed to keep that clean sheet, we're still, conceding some of those moments, or like getting, I think a couple of moments we got hit on the counter and things. So there's still things to work on and improve. But I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, like the 3 points, a clean sheet, a really good performance that consolidated our position, is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, and look, as you sort of mentioned there, I think it's easy to forget the work at that end of the pitch, and I think Ingram had a fantastic game. I think when Keno bags 2 goals, there's going to be a lot of focus on him and sort of the forward third of the pitch. But I thought Elder Coyle with that ball for the first goal as well was fantastic. We're talking about best hits of the season. That's best assist of the season. That
was a marvelous switch. That was so just a
pinpoint. Yeah, it was just so perfectly hit that the keeper. You see the Oxford keeper sort of come out because he's sort of like, it's hit far enough in front of Keno that he sort of feels like he should go for it and to gather it, but it's just under hit just enough that it gives Keno the advantage to run onto it, and it was perfect. It was inch perfect. And Ingram as well with some fantastic saves.
Yeah, I think I unfortunately wasn't able to watch the match, but seems like it's pretty strong performances across the pitch, and that's winning breeds confidence and can become a habit. So hopefully we're in that again. I think, like I've mentioned a few times throughout this season, that those pockets of games where if you can you win 5 and then you might drop a couple, but if you can win in those pockets and you can open up some gaps. And I think, like, the last time I was on was probably just before this 5-match run, and it's a little bit of negativity creeping back in around the performances and our position and how everyone else had games in hand and all these sorts of things. But I think we've seen over these last 5 games that the points on the board is what really counts, because it's just that this competition's so unpredictable, and so there's games that we've thought we should have won that we've lost, but it's balanced out because there's games that the teams around us, Doncaster was on like a 5 or 6 game unbeaten run and looked like they would continue that, and I think, and then they dropped points that I would have thought when they played someone down near the bottom that they would have picked up, and the same with Lincoln, and like just everyone around us is sort of experiencing that same thing where there's no gimme games, there's no easy games in this division, and we can't really worry about what everyone else is doing. We got what have we got, about 10 or 12 games or something left?
10 games left. 10 games left.
Yeah. So we just got to try and maintain the rage through the last 10 games. I think this break that we've had, this midweek break, is actually going to come at a pretty good time. It's not a huge break that's going to affect our concentration much, but it'll be just enough to hopefully bit of extra freshness in the legs, a couple of extra days training and recovery will just, I think, help us in this run in to keep going and keep pushing. And I think we probably only, what do we got, and win half of them, and we're just about like guaranteed in that top 6. We're pretty close to guaranteed in the top 6 as it is anyway. I think we've built quite a decent buffer against 6th. So
while we're talking about it, we'll do our MVP votes in a second. But while we're talking about it, I'll use that as an opportunity. I'll pull up the table now, so that might help us as we're sort of talking here. I'll zoom in a little bit so I can actually see. You're sort of looking at anywhere from Portsmouth up, I think, are still chasing that, or maybe Fleetwood's probably a little far back, especially with the 36 games played. But anywhere from Portsmouth up, still chasing a place in that top 6. But you look at the fact that Charlton, they're in 6th, or I guess Ipswich in 7th, 14 points behind us with 2 games in hand on us. Like you say, I think you probably call it another 3 wins probably to lock in a top 6 place. And then, as Logan and I were sort of talking about last week with with how many wins to secure automatic promotion. I think Logan was sort of saying 5 or 6 wins. I think most people on Twitter were saying 7 or 8 wins. Obviously now we've got that win against Oxford to take that down a win required. But we'll sort of talk, Peterborough did manage to get the win midweek, Sunderland as well. But, Lincoln dropping points, Doncaster dropping points, these sides who are chasing that top 2 place, it's really feeling like it's a race of 3. It's feeling like it's between Sunderland, Posh and ourselves for the top 2, I should say. And you've got Sunderland playing Lincoln this weekend as well, which is a massive fixture. And weirdly enough, you're sort of in a position now where you almost want Lincoln to win that game just for maximum drop points for Sunderland, to mean that they're mathematically unable to chase us with their games in hand.
Yeah. So it's interesting how it's all going to play out. And I think the other thing, like again with those games in hand, like that just means in this last whatever it is, 2 months or whatever, they've just got those extra games to squeeze in, extra fixture load, all that extra, might be travel or whatever to contend with, that just might help give us the edge in this scenario.
Yeah, for sure. We'll round off on that Oxford game then, and give our MVP votes, and then we'll talk more about the the off-field news of the week, as well as the rivals fixtures in the league. But I'll probably start off with mine, and I think it's hard to go past Lewis Potter for the 3 votes in this one, with the 2 goals and his impact on the performance as well. And then I'm going to give the 2 to Coyle. I think that assist for the first goal was fantastic, and as I sort of said before, I think the defence has been really tremendous over the last few games, keeping the clean sheets that they have, and they're a little bit unheralded, I would think. And then Ingram for the couple of really great saves from him in the match as well.
Yeah, I probably would agree with Keane Lewis Potter. The 2 great goals, that shot that was so close to a third, and a couple of really good balls that were whipped across that made really good opportunities for, I think Wilkes was one that he just needed to get across his defender, and he probably has a tap in at the near post. And there was another one that was quite decent as well, possibly for White, but really strong all-round good performance, and putting the hard work in defence as well a few times, getting back. So 3 points to Keane Lewis Potter. I probably go with the same players, but I flip them around. I think some really, really smart saves from Ingram that kept us. That, if Oxford scores and makes it 1-1, it sort of maybe changes the complexion of that game. And I think those saves really helped us consolidate our position, maybe break Oxford's mentality, a little bit, break their confidence. So 2 to Ingram and then 1 to Coyle for a good performance and a beautiful switcheroo.
Fair enough. Look, I mean, it's interesting. Still 10 games to go, but it is interesting that we're starting to get rumours. I mean, it's always hard to know with transfer rumours how much truth there is in them, or if it's just paper talk and agents doing their thing. But we are starting to get a few rumours around potential acquisitions in the off-season, and I think most people would agree that if we took the squad that we have, if we converted the White loan into a permanent deal, if we signed Jones onto another year, if we take the squad that we've got into the championship, I would say that it's a very competitive squad. I think the main position that most people would agree we need to strengthen is the striker. And we have been linked to Dion Charles from Accrington Stanley, who's got 17 goals for the season as of last week. I don't know if he scored midweek, which seems to be the right idea. I mean, Eves was a prolific striker in League One before we picked him up as well, so it is hard to assess how good or how reasonable a target that is. But prolific striker in confidence. I was sort of saying in the chat during the week, I think any side going up, similar to when we went up to the Premier League last time, I think the logic that I would approach signings with is looking at the rivals around you going for promotion and trying to pick off their best players, because if they don't get promoted, a lot of their squad will be, have had one eye on the next division up, being sort of mentally ready for it. And that frustration of missing out could make them quite an opportune target for a signing. And then quite clearly as well, if they're competing up the top of the League One with you, they're going to be a reasonably quality signing. So whether it's a Clark Harris from Peterborough as well, who maybe would be out of the price range, but Charles potentially, Accrington not looking too likely to make the playoffs, but Charles looks like he's in great form, potentially decent acquisition.
Yeah, I think I guess it comes down. Haven't even looked at who's off contract for us as well, because that's another thing. Like when we go up, who are we gonna leave? Who's gonna attract interest? And we know there's probably going to be a few players that will attract some interest. So keeping a hold of those is equally as important. But if there is a chance that we're going to nab a striker who's scored 17 this year, then I mean you sort of got to grab it, right?
Yeah. I think that. Yeah, look, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we tried to move Eves on, whether we see if there's any interest in him from League One, whether Gillingham potentially signs him back. You sometimes see those where, if the move hasn't worked out, you go back to the familiar surroundings and sort of recapture your form. I mean, look, for me, the main ones are players like Doherty, Honeyman, Greaves even, as being important players to keep hold of. Lewis Potter as well, Wilkes, where I think if we go up, makes that job very easy. They're obviously the vulnerable ones if we don't go up, that they'd be sort of looked at by, in a similar sort of logic, that if a Sunderland or a Peterborough goes up, that they would sort of target our better players.
Yeah, so I guess it's I don't know. I guess we'll just see what happens, but I guess we'll just focus on the job at hand. Worry about, I guess, really, we just worry about making sure we get that promotion first, and then worry about the squad after that, I think. Yeah,
I mean, the only other interesting one to bring up was Ormond Otterwill, I believe is how it's pronounced, left wing back or left back from, formerly of Arsenal. I think he's playing in Norway or somewhere like that. Only reason I find that one particularly interesting is obviously we've at the moment got Elder, Fleming and Clark all essentially left backs. Clark on a short-term deal, though. I wonder, with the sort of murmurings around this one, whether there's any sense that there's almost no chance that Clark will stay, or perhaps it's just us sort of going, well, just in case Clark leaves, Fleming maybe isn't quite ready to be a championship backup, so we want to strengthen there. That was the only other interesting bit out of that, I thought.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess, Fleming, I think if we went up to the championship, Fleming would be one that would probably go out on loan. Maybe back to League One where he could maybe get a full season of games, sort of get up to speed with first team football and things like that. But I guess be interesting. I'd like to see, Clark get some games. It's nice to see, like he left, and then like nice to see him come back, or that we approached to get him to come back. Hometown kid. It's always nice to see those academy products end up one way or another in the first team.
It was interesting in the article on Ormond Otterwill that it almost seemed like, I find there's sometimes interesting bits of news that kind of get tucked away in articles, but there was a mention at the bottom that Clark is at the moment injured, which I haven't seen reported anywhere. So news to me, but would certainly explain why he's not even making the squad at the moment. Look, fingers crossed it's something minor. And as you say, maybe towards the end of the season, once things are sewn up, we can start to play around a bit and get some sort of sentimental picks in the side, if nothing else. And, try and form a Hull 11 almost with, Coyle and Clark with Greaves at the back as well. And a few other boys, Lewis Potter up forward, obviously, as well. And try and get a few of those boys all in the side together.
That'd be the dream.
Fun. Yeah. Well, look, we'll talk about the Shrewsbury game now, and we're sort of talking about the opportunities that have opened up with those midweek fixtures. And as you say, it's certainly sort of proving to be the case that the points on the board are better than the games in hand. I sort of bumped an old tweet that I'd made back in early February of saying that, yes, we were second in the table at the time, but sides having games in hand around us meant that we weren't really second, and more than happy for that to have aged terribly with those sides having lost those games in hand. But it does mean, as we were sort of saying just before, it does mean that only Sunderland, I believe, and obviously Peterborough, can catch us with their games in hand. So it's in our hands to an extent. We just have to keep winning our fixtures, and this game against Shrewsbury does prove an opportunity for that. I know, as you say, there's no easy games in the division, but 1 win in 5 for them. would suggest that sort of, mid-table, they're not really at threat of relegation too much. I think they're 9 points ahead of Northampton, who are in 21st. So you would think that they're sort of settled and secure, and there's not a whole lot for them to play for. That's sort of the perfect side to be playing at this time of season.
Yeah, I think it's I think we lost the reverse, so we'll probably win this one.
Yeah.
That's our trend for the year. Not many, but I don't know. Yeah, I think like the form we're in. I mean, this is probably what's going to kill us now. I'm going to say repeat this old like line, but the form we're in, and with the 12 goals in the last 5 and only 1 conceded and 4 clean sheets, I can't really see us sort of dropping these points. I'd be shocked if we didn't pick up the 3 points this against Shrewsbury. So
was Matt Miller, who was on loan at Shrewsbury from the Jets, I believe, earlier in the season. I think he might have played in the game against us. It's sort of a shame.
I think he did.
Yeah, it's sort of a shame he's come back to Australia now, because it would have been really good to see a bit more, if that had worked out really well for him, see a bit more of an avenue for Australian players to go out to, I think League One or lower championships really comparable to the A-League. So I think it would have been interesting to see how that could have worked out longer term.
Yeah, I wonder if it was just like the terms of the deal that he was
once
just
the A-League started.
Yeah, essentially that took him, because it was only like the 3rd game. Like the Jets only played 2 or 3 games, I think, without him, and then he was back in Australia. So I wonder if it was just something like that it was just a short-term deal, see how he could cope at that, like over there in England, and then just come back and play this season. And I wonder how long his Jets contract runs for. Must be up soon if he's going on adventures around the world to see if he can cut it and put himself in the shop window, because
that's a good point.
He's done a pretty good. I thought he did a good job at Shrewsbury. There seemed to be lots of good comments about his performances and things. So, if this happened to be his last season at the Jets, you wonder if perhaps that Shrewsbury would then make an approach to bring him back and not have to pay for him, at the end of the season or something. So
and that's a good point. I wonder if it's sort of part of that it's, and even if it's not Shrewsbury, whether it's another League One club can suddenly say, well, hang on, he's already proved that he can play at a decent level and he's available on a free sort of thing. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess interesting thing with the Oxford game as well was the fact that we'd made no changes going into that one, and as you sort of said, with the week break for this game now, we've got fresh legs, bit more time to rest and recover from any sort of knocks. I'd sort of suggest that we'll probably go into this one unchanged as well. I don't really see a reason to change the lineup for this one.
No, I agree. I think we've mentioned it a few times when we've been able to play with 3 really dynamic forwards. So I think at the moment, Lewis Potter, White, and Wilkes, but previously it might have been with a Delacoon or someone else up in that forward 3. Was when we've had our most prolific spells and looked the most dangerous, when those players are able to move around and interchange in their positioning and not affect our structure too much. Whereas when we start with Magennis, we sort of are much more limited in that ability, because Magennis doesn't really. He's not a wide player, so it doesn't make sense for him to switch out and Wilkes or Lewis Potter to come in the middle. But when you've got White or someone who's more dynamic in that sense with their pace and footwork, that ability to move them, interchange positions and move defenses around is really, really dangerous. So I think I'd see no reason to be changing the lineup. Barring any horrible touchwood training injuries or something.
Yeah, no, for sure, and it's an interesting one. Coming just back quickly to the links to Charles is it's sort of like with the Eves signing as well, where you look at that where we had Bowen and Grzycki looking so dangerous on the wings, and bringing in a target man or a sort of central focus doesn't actually work as well as you would think, because as you say, we're so dynamic when those wingers can overlap and sort of rotate amongst themselves, and it's much more fluid and unpredictable. It's a lot harder for sides to prepare for us when they don't know, is Wilkes going to be playing out wide or, through the center? Is KLP going to cut inside and swap wings and things like that? So it actually makes the discussion, and it's obviously for maybe a month or two's time of how we would actually envision lining up in the championship, and whether we do try and aim just for that sort of smaller front three who can rotate. It's an interesting sort of discussion.
And I'll tell you what, as a centre half, I absolutely hate it when I've got like players changing and moving around and changing. I'd love to mark Eves, no offense, but he's like, because he just stays in that central corridor like 90% of the time, and so you just stand with him.
And
trying to mark
a
Wilkes or Keen Lewis Potter or something, they're zipping around all over the place, trying to pull you out of position, and you can't let them go, so you have to go with them, and they're making holes and causing all sorts of problems. So I think that's where we've got to. I mean, I guess that seems to be how McCann wants us to play. So really dynamic and forward moving. So I think it suits when we have that dynamic front three. So just keep going, and I guess we'll see. It didn't quite work last season in the championship, but if we could bring in the right players or keep a hold of the right players, then I think it still has the potential to be a really dangerous formation at the next level up.
I think the main reason it probably didn't work last season was especially the departure of Bowen and Grzycki, obviously, and essentially trying to gel in new players halfway through the season and just confidence dropping with each game, chopping and changing the formation. We now have a structure that works really well, and I think what I find so appealing about it now is it doesn't feel as reliant on individuals. It's more the system. So, for instance, like you were saying, we had a Delican earlier in the season who was playing that role. We had Meyer who was playing it for a bit. We had Scott as well, who as not as prolific, but they all sort of fit into that system now. And a Delican left, we slotted in White, and White's fit in seamlessly. So I think that's what sort of appeals to me is if when we go up is it's not as reliant on individual players. I think obviously, if we lost a Wilkes or a Lewis Potter, that does change things significantly. And I'd hope that those sorts of contingencies are things that the club works on to have, capable backups to those positions. But I think the structures and the philosophy is now starting to take shape a lot better. And hopefully this season has put a lot more confidence in the players that they can execute it.
Yeah, and I think also, I don't know, it seems to be that poor old Grant McCann, anytime he loses a game, the fan base seems to be on his back ready to take his head. But I would hope that, a successful season, albeit in League One, where we, earn that, we get that instant bounce back, we're back in the championship, earns him like a little bit of trust and respect from the wider fan base. Because, I think let's be fair, he's got a pretty rough hand with the owners that he's working for and things. So he's doing his best. He didn't look like he had the answers last season, but he seems to have figured things out a little bit better this year. So I think he's a young manager, or young in his managerial career, or he's young as well anyway, but he's still learning and still figuring it out. But I think the strides he's made this year, he looks a completely different manager to last season.
I think one of the first episodes this season, I asked Mike that question of what would it take for McCann to win over the City supporters. And Mike basically said we could go up 46 wins, 0 draws, 0 losses, and there'd be fans that aren't convinced by McCann. And I think that's true to an extent. And I think the wobble in January or February of this year has revealed that those mistrusts are still there, even as terrific as we've been this season. And I think part way to winning the fans back over will be if we go up as champions. I think going up as champions is the really important thing. I think McCann needs to, I don't know if he needs media training or something. I think he just needs to be a bit more careful with some of the things he says in the media. The stuff with Lewis Potter, Wilkes. Yeah. There was a comment recently where he sort of said, look, we're all focused on going up, but if it doesn't happen, we'll do it next year. And I'm like, you don't need to say that, because you don't even need to entertain the possibility that we're not going to go up and we'll have to do it again next year. Even, if that was to happen, okay, it would happen, but you don't need to kind of voice that. And so there's just these little things which I think he sort of says that makes his job harder for himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think for me personally, I think if we go up as champions first of all, or even if we come up second, it's still, you know, automatic promotion. I think is a big tick, and then it's starting next season well. And I think it's starting it well enough that we're not in a relegation fight, or you know, uh, I think that's for me is that, you know, if we get promoted, it's just taking us back to where we should be as a club, and it's from there that he then has to win the trust back. But I think, you know, whether the narrative then changes to it's okay, yes, it's the alums selling Bowen and Grzycki that was what really undid us, but I think his attitude in that second half of the season is part of the issue as well. So it's a tough one. I kind of agree with you. I think he's a young manager. He's still learning. But there's been times where he hasn't necessarily done himself any favors. And it's going to be interesting to see, you know, look, if he took us up to the Premier League, if we went up and next season we went up, you know, from the Championship straight up to Premier League, I think that would go a long way to, obviously would go a long way to winning people over. But that's probably a bit far-fetched. It's a hard one. I don't quite know what he needs to do.
Yeah, I guess I guess if he's being reflective, like within himself, and I know you don't like when you're in those positions, you don't take much stock in the media and social media and things, but if he's at least paying attention to like what people are unhappy with, like, you know, so he makes these silly comments and people go, why would you say that? If he like looks at that and goes, oh, you know what, maybe that was like a silly thing to say, and next time he's in that position he doesn't say that, and he's actually growing and improving and like thinking about things in a different way, then I'd be happy with that. Like next season, I think, you know, because
100%.
there was things he did last season which I was like, phew, but he's not repeated those same mistakes this season. He's making different mistakes, so for the most part, but like, I guess
I think he still gets a bit standoffish in interviews when we've lost a game and Burnsy or someone's asked him a question. He gets, which there's plenty of, like, you look at Mourinho, you know, there's plenty of successful managers who are standoffish in interviews. So that's not something to necessarily count too much against him, but it doesn't help the fans, I guess.
Yeah, I think I guess it's going to be if we get promotion. And then you looking at that, you know, that 10 games into next season, once the things have settled down a bit, if we're not in the bottom three and not anywhere near the bottom three by that point, I'd be pretty satisfied with that as, you know, as good progress.
Absolutely, yeah. So then just quickly before we get score predictions in for this one, mentioned already, so Sunderland playing Lincoln's probably the big one to keep an eye on for City fans tonight. Peterborough playing Rochdale. Yes, Rochdale are in the bottom four. I think they might even be last. But that being said, they did knock off Lincoln last time out, which was a massive help. They're second last. So equal on points with Swindon, but they're off the bottom on goal difference. But, of course, the important thing with Rochdale, of course, is that they have Agent McShane playing for them as captain. So I'm sure he'll be doing everything he can to help City earn promotion. So wouldn't be out of this world to see them get something against Peterborough, I guess. Maybe that's a bit of wishful thinking, but that's an important fixture as well. And, you know, Gillingham playing Doncaster. I think Doncaster's starting to slip away a little bit from that automatic promotion race, but sort of still in the picture somewhat, and Gillingham in good form. So that's another potential interesting fixture to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I know I'll be keeping an eye on those scores as I watch City in the morning. So I think a few twists and turns still to go in this last little bit of a run in, but I think we've got ourselves in a good position, and we just have to try and, you know, do what we can to maintain that and not worry about what other games are really happening. So just do what we can and hope for the best. Fingers crossed that those other results go our way as well. But yeah, not too stressed about it. And
what's your score prediction for this one against Shrewsbury?
You know, just maybe another 2-0. I reckon 2-0. Maybe I could see White grabbing one at least. Then don't know. I'm not sure about the other. You know what? Probably I'm sort of sensing like another like Reece Burke off a corner, like a jag and some weird goal again. He gets some strange ones.
Talking about you know, Eves has got a couple of goals, but it's actually crazy to say that Reece Burke's got more goals than him, because I have a feeling coming into this season he hadn't scored for us and might not have even scored a senior goal. So He's suddenly kind of, once he's broken the damn wall, a couple are flowing his way now, which is great to see. It'd be good to see Greaves finally get one after he got that goal taken off him by Magennis. But I reckon I could see, I'd probably agree with 2-0. I could see Wilkes getting on the score sheet just to sort of remind everyone that he's still around and still scoring goals.
What's he at in the league? How many does he need to get 20 goals in the
That's
league
a
this
good
season?
question. Hang on, I'll look that up because I think he's actually quite close. I think he's on 16 or 17, but I'll have a look. So I'd say Wilkes scoring one, and wishful thinking, but it would be great to see Lewis Potter score one as well to get into double figures, just so we can get those 3 players on double figures for the season, which would be great. But look, the way that some of our players are playing at the moment, I wouldn't be surprised to see anyone scoring, whether it's a Doherty popping up with another goal because he hasn't scored for a little while. I've sort of given up. I had for a while there. I was sort of harboring thoughts that Honeyman could get the double and get double digits assists and goals, but I think he's a little bit off that now. I think he's only got the 2 goals for the season. Wilkes is on 17, so he's I think it's well within reason that he'll finish the season over 20 goals for the season, which would be great to see. And Lewis Potter's on 9.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've got a couple of targets for the last little section of the season, so that's good.
Which is good because I think that's also really important. We sort of half jokingly talking about all these, goal targets, but I think the players, it's interesting a few years ago watching the Man City documentary when they'd sewn up the league and they set internal targets of, whether it's 100 points or a certain number of goals, things like that you do need those targets to keep your focus, because it'd be very easy for City players. Say we win tonight against Shrewsbury and Peterborough and Sunderland both drop points. It'd be very easy for City players to start to take their eyes off the prize and sort of start to think it's already wrapped up. So having those focus targets on personal goals or whether team goals is still really important.
Yeah, I think it'll just give them that little bit of focus, little bit of and I guess the other thing is that even if they whether they stay at City or they don't in the future, but being able to have a 10 goal or a 20 goal season or whatever, that's really good for them on their CVs essentially as players, and that's what you want. You want them to be performing as best they can to create the best career they can. Hopefully staying with us at City, but if not, then they need those little targets, whether maybe don't stack up as much as a golden boot or whatever, but if you get 10 goals this year, if Keane Lewis Potter gets that this year and then can go and get 10 goals again next year, then starts to look like a really consistent player, then they're the sorts of things that can help build you into a really strong career. So
definitely,
and anytime you can get 20 goals in a season, it's just good. So fingers crossed for Wilkes over the run-in.
Yeah, we got a comment from Cam there saying, "Sup, boys? G'day, Cam. Glad to see you watching along live. We always appreciate live viewers and live comments as well. So that's great to see as well." Look, I think the interesting thing with Lewis Potter is we sort of look at the side that we had last season in the Championship, and yes, it was dominated by Bowen doing so well for us in that first half of the season. But Lewis Potter at Championship level did score whether I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 or 5 goals. I think maybe 3 or 4. I got that 3rd goal against Birmingham, which was fantastic. Got that, I think it was eventually ruled an offside, an own goal in that Charlton game that finished 2-2. But look, he didn't look out of place at Championship level last season. So I think we've got a couple of really good prospects for next season. And as you say, even just for this season, getting those goal-scoring targets will be good for the players. We've got another comment from Cam here. I'll pop it up. So he's saying, just tuning in, not sure if you've covered it yet, but White and Crowley, do we make a push to re-sign them at the end of the season? White has looked good, great player, square peg, round hole. Well, yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, when you say square peg, round hole, I think White has fit in really well. I think Crowley potentially, if that's the one that you're referring to as being the square peg, round hole, Crowley has looked really good, yeah, but doesn't really seem to fit the system. I think White, as sort of an alternate to Wilkes or KLP or Magennis in that front three, I'd be very keen to sign him permanently. I think he's the really easy answer. Crawley, I'm not as sure about because it's frustrating. I feel like if we don't sign him, he's going to go on to have a great career and it's going to be one of those if-onlys. But we could sign him and it just doesn't work out for him a bit. He's saying he meant Crowley. Yeah. Crowley looks like a great player, but just doesn't really seem to fit the system. So where do you see Crowley in plans for next year?
I sort of agree with you. I think like White, no brainer. He's looked really good. We were talking about earlier how having that dynamic front three has really benefited us. I think Crowley, as you say, is a really good, really handy player. But I don't know whether it's, because he's not that old. Is he? He's only 20?
No. He's only like 22 or 21 or 20 or something.
So, there's still a lot of learning to go. But I've sort of found that he dallies on the ball a bit. Right, when we're on the counter and he receives it and he should just be looking to try and play a pass early, he starts he's sort of holding onto it a bit long and sort of just, I don't know, trying to do too much maybe. But I think he will have a really strong career. I don't know if we really need where he really, because he's got enough. He's got enough talent that he probably deserves to be a first team player somewhere, but I can't see him dislodging Honeyman anytime soon. It's such as the form that he's in. Yeah. So
it's basically him competing with Honeyman for that spot. And Honeyman, to me, I feel like Honeyman's set pieces are slightly better than Crowley. And as you say, I feel like Crowley just seems like he's a much, not slow player, but as you say, he just holds the ball a lot more, whereas Honeyman is much more energetic, pushing forward, quick passes, spraying it out to the wings. Or just getting it forward, where I think Crowley's style doesn't necessarily suit our sort of fast-paced counters as well. But look, I'm sure that in 2-3 years' time we'll be sitting here saying, Crowley's looking great at Norwich or somewhere in the Premier League, and remember when we had him on loan and it just didn't work out. And I have no doubt he's going to be a great player. It's just like Josh King now at Bournemouth and now at Everton, but just didn't seem to work out with us. It's just one of those things, I think, sometimes where the system doesn't quite suit the player.
Yeah, and there'll be someone else will come in and grab him and hope, and they'll have the right system that suits him, that they want, like maybe a slower build up with someone who's really technical and can control in that area the way that Crowley likes to play. Just doesn't quite. I think he was like a good signing in the sense that he is a really good attacking player. And it was worth having, a slightly different option there to see and as some direct backup for Honeyman, but it just hasn't quite worked out. So I think it's a good signing, but I wouldn't re-sign him or I wouldn't pursue him on a permanent, if that makes sense.
I think he's one of those signings where if say Doherty or Honeyman had like a 3-4 week injury, we'd be saying, geez, how good is it we've got Crowley to just step into that spot seamlessly, and how good is it we've got that depth? But because those guys have stayed mainly fit and haven't had those issues or suspensions or anything like that, it's almost like a break glass in case of emergency signing where it hasn't been needed, but he's been great to have there as that depth player.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we're both going for 2-0 wins against Shrewsbury tonight, which will be fantastic. Once again, we don't have a game midweek, which, it's nice for the players to get a rest. It's nice for us. It's not as bulky a podcast as it sometimes is. So I think our next fixture after tonight, we've got Gillingham next Sunday. So talking about Gillingham being in a bit of decent form, that will be an interesting game to look forward to as well. But until next time, thanks for joining me, Dan.
Not a problem.
And thanks everyone for listening in. Cheers, Cam, for joining us and asking a question. We always love getting questions. So if everyone wants to sort of watch along live, shoot in questions while we're chatting, it's always much appreciated. Gives us a bit of interaction with you guys as well. So that's always appreciated as well. But look, if you're catching us on a replay, hit the like button, drop a comment in the comments on the YouTube video. If you've got any sort of comments or questions for us for the next episode, or just share the podcast around. It's always appreciated as well. So until next time, come on, City.